Let's reclaim what's ours. Our data is our personhood. It's our being. It's our digital DNA. It's probably more valuable than our biological DNA because it's our whole lived experience. It's what we feel, what we think, how we emote. It's in the thought that a young person could go on a chatbot, share their vulnerabilities directly with a chatbot, and then be manipulated by that it's just morally wrong. We need technology that's in harmony with our democratic ideals and principles and basic human rights.
The Amber Mack Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Welcome to the Amber Mack Show. Coming up in today's show, we're going to talk about Zuckerberg's greatest scam yet that is making the company billions of dollars. And speaking of scams, Jeff, why Elon Musk is taking his Tesla board for a ride for a cool $1 trillion.
Oh, yeah. And we're also going to talk about Apple's AI problem, Kim Kardashian's ChatGPT breakup. And Amber, I'm looking forward to your conversation a little bit later with the billionaire businessman who wants to buy TikTok and make the internet a better place. But first, let's get into the headlines.
Newsfeed.
Well, Amber, I talked about Meta being the cornerstone of the internet fraud economy in The Other Mac segment about a month ago. But Reuters has just reported on a trove of previously unreleased documents that show not just the scale of Meta's scam ad empire, but Meta's startlingly casual attitude about trying to improve the situation.
Yeah, this is just shocking to read this. Meta estimated that in 2024, more than 10% of its annual earnings came from advertising banned goods and other scams for a total, now just this number is staggering, of $16 billion in revenue last year. It accomplished this by showing its user base 15 billion scams every day. This has been going on for years, and in 2023, Meta decided to do something about it, namely laying off the entire team that handled advertiser concerns.
Yeah, the details about this are just disgraceful. So in 2023, they estimated that they received roughly 100,000 user reports about fraudsters, and Meta ignored 96% of those. And in fact, regulators in the UK found that Meta was involved in 54% of all payment-related scam losses that year. And that's more than double every other social media network combined. And so what was one of Meta's main suggestions for how to deal with this? Why don't we charge scammers more for running scam ads? Which is just obvious, shows how little they care about users in all of this.
The bizarre thing to me is that here in Canada, as I think many people know, because of the Online News Act, Meta has complied with the act by blocking news. So I totally understand why they chose to do that. But there are a lot of people saying, hey, they're just adhering to the law. Well, it seems that Meta is one of these companies, Jeff, that only adheres to the law when it makes sense for them and they make more money because this is a perfect example when you talk about allowing advertisements of what are in some cases unlawful advertisements and business activities. You can see that they are making billions of dollars by acting in this really shady way.
And Amber, I would also interject that one of their solution points was that we have to sort of prioritize where we deal with these fraudulent things because we don't want to get, sued by regulators and stuff. So they were saying, let's make sure that, we focus on places where we might have to pay a fine because that'll save us more money. So it's very deeply insincere on their part.
It really is, and I will say once I was posting about this on LinkedIn, Arlene Dickinson, who people will know, of course, from Dragon's Den, as well as other ventures and programs, she actually posted that she had a scam ad using her likeness within the Meta universe, and it was nearly impossible to get that taken down. So if Arlene Dickinson cannot get a scam ad taken down, all of us are in serious trouble.
Indeed.
Now, speaking of scammers, it looks like Elon Musk has convinced Tesla shareholders to support his ridiculous $1 trillion pay package.
Yeah, and this is such Kool-Aid drinking nonsense. It's like a cult. People point to the fact that, oh, there are some really major accomplishments necessary to get to that $1 trillion amount. Well, fair enough. I'm not sure that $1 trillion amount is the goal, because what they ignore is that Musk will still be grossly overpaid, even if he just manages to secure a fraction of those goals, some of which are pretty easy. And, give him controlling shares and all this sort of stuff. It's just hard to imagine. And it's in the face of Tesla's sales continuing their downslide in North America and just cratering in Europe. Like in Germany, sales are down by 50% this year. So that also ignores the fact that Tesla shareholders, in doing this, are diluting their own shareholdings in the process. So it's really hard to understand. But don't worry, Elon's got another solution for this. He swears that Tesla drivers will be able to, quote, text and drive in the next month or two. And I guess that he's forgotten that not only has the full self-driving mode for Teslas actually killed people and they're in court for it, but texting while driving is illegal in most places. So, but what does that matter? As we're increasingly seeing, laws are for the rest of us, not for billionaires, right, Amber?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here are two great examples, right? Zuckerberg and Musk. They only adhere to the law when it is in their best interest, and otherwise they totally ignore it. Now, moving a bit away from Musk, which is something that I think more people should consider doing, it looks like Apple's going to address Siri's AI shortcomings, at least in the short term, by leveraging Google's Gemini at a cost of about $1 billion a year. The improved Siri should reach users in the spring of 2026. Jeff, I am a Google user. You are an Apple user. What do you think about this move?
I mean, something has to be done about Siri. I mostly love Apple products, but Siri's a total embarrassment at this point. So it's good that they are doing something. They really, it's getting to the point where if they can't do it themselves, it makes sense for them to use a partner. So the agreement specifies that the Gemini model will still be run on Apple's own servers. So no data is supposed to be shared with Google. So hopefully the privacy stuff remains intact. And it also does seem that Apple will continue trying to develop its own solution in the meantime. And, in terms of partnering with anyone, frankly, I'd trust, Google's not perfect, but I sure would trust Google over OpenAI at this point. And Apple's obviously been working with Google for years already through the Safari browser arrangement and all that stuff. So just fingers crossed that this works well, because Apple users deserve not to be left in the sort of trail of dust by the other much more functional AI assistants out there.
Absolutely. And speaking of OpenAI, CEO Sam Altman has had a really rough couple of weeks. For example, details emerging from Elon Musk's lawsuit against OpenAI have produced testimony saying that Sam Altman's brief removal as OpenAI's CEO was the result of Altman not being, and I'm quoting here, consistently candid with his communications with the board, end quote, as well as pitting executives against one another, withholding information, and providing conflicting information about his plans for the company. This is something out of a dramatic series or movie, Jeff, including in the face of safety concerns that were being raised, releasing ChatGPT to the public without even telling the board. The board apparently found out on Twitter.
Yeah, and on top of that, we've got OpenAI's CFO was saying that, oh, the market should be more exuberant about AI, and let's stop all this silly bubble talk. In addition to musing about a federal government backstop guarantee for OpenAI because of its investments and importance to the race for American AI dominance, which she tried to walk back a bit, but then Altman came back and said something pretty close to that. So it's no surprise to see where this is all going, where you've got a relatively corrupt government in power that can be taken advantage like this. And what's wild is that, and speaking of companies getting too big to fail, something we should have learned our lessons from in the Great Recession, is that this is all happening aside one of the biggest players in the AI race, NVIDIA. Their CEO is saying at the Financial Times Future of AI Summit in early November that, I quote, China is going to win the AI race, end quote, and arguing that cynicism and excessive regulation in the United States is partly to blame for this situation.
Wow. All right. Well, we're going to keep up with this AI news. You might have already seen Coca Cola's new AI Christmas ads, which I've seen, which some people hoped wouldn't be repeated after last year's backlash over Coke's AI generated holidays are coming commercial. But as Coca Cola's head of generative AI has said, and by the way, this is a surprising entry in the Coca Cola company's org chart, there will be people who criticize we cannot keep everyone 100% happy.
Yeah, and he tried to pin last year's criticism on the craftsmanship sort of quality of the ad, saying, quote, "But this year the craftsmanship is 10 times better." It may be better, but there's still no mistaking the animation as being anything other than AI-generated slop. Uh, it's also strange that they never mentioned Christmas in this ad, despite it being full of Christmas trees and Santa Claus and all this stuff. But anyway, uh, do you know who else, though, is criticizing AI, Amber? Very important person, none other than Kim Kardashian.
I saw this, so I'm glad we're getting a chance to chat about this. In an interview with Vanity Fair, among other outlets who also published this, Kim Kardashian, who recently hopped on board the fake moon landing conspiracy train, said she used ChatGPT to study for her first year law student's exam and blamed it, that being ChatGPT, for her failing 3 times, saying that it was, quoting here, always wrong. It has made me fail tests all the time. And then I'll get mad and I'll yell at it and be like, "You made me fail. Why did you do this?" And it will talk back to me. I'm kind of speechless a little bit on this one. I mean, who would ever depend on a tool like this to pass any type of exam?
I mean, I think a lot of people just don't understand how AI works, and Kim Kardashian is one of the least surprising ones of those. But, life is a struggle if you're a billionaire reality TV star, so poor Kim. Anyway, in another instance of tech companies trying to get more training data out of their users, the Tinder dating app is now testing a new chemistry feature, and it says it can help you find better matches. All it needs is access to your camera roll. And they called this a quote, a major pillar of Tinder's upcoming 2026 product experience.
Wow. Okay, so Tinder's user base has been shrinking for the past couple of years. So this seems like an attempt to provide better value. But let's face it, this is also a total privacy nightmare. Thankfully, this only happens once you give the app permission to do so, which I don't think I'd encourage anyone to actually do,
No.
Jeff. And I know you're going to talk now about AI's role in dating, and that's coming up next in The Other Mac.
The Other Mac.
A survey by Forbes Health has found that the average dating app user spends 51 minutes each day in app. That number has decreased from around 90 minutes a day in 2018, and maybe that's because in this year's survey, 78% of users reported sometimes, often, or always feeling mentally, emotionally, or physically exhausted by their dating apps. In response, apps like Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, and Grindr have begun investing in AI-related features in an effort to re-engage users. In fact, Match's 14th annual singles study in America, released this summer, reported that 26% of singles are using AI to enhance their dating lives, an increase of 333% from just last year. This includes things like improving dating profiles, screening matches for compatibility, coming up with conversation starters, and lots more. And companies are starting to build all these kinds of tools right into their apps. But AI romance has moved far beyond dating apps with the rise of AI chatbots. Match's study found that 33% of Gen Z and 23% of millennials surveyed have interacted with AI as their romantic partner, and 40% of users reported that they think their partner having an AI boyfriend or girlfriend would be cheating. Unfortunately, there are some real dangers to becoming romantically involved with an AI as well. For one thing, as many of us have experienced, chatbots are often comically overenthusiastically supportive about the person they're chatting with. And while that can be nice a lot of the time, a good romantic partner is one who will challenge you when needed. But it's also a privacy nightmare. The amount of information that can be casually collected as part of an ongoing romance with an AI is staggering. And there are tons of scams out there that could part vulnerable humans from money that they sure didn't intend to spend. Finally, There are well-founded psychological concerns about how dark things could get with an AI partner, where any human partner would have just opted out. But the most concerning thing to me is how this relates to what some people call our loneliness epidemic. Since I was born, the world's population has doubled, and urbanization has meant that more people are living in cities than ever before. So today, you're likely to be in physical proximity to more people than ever in history, and yet we're more likely than ever to feel alone. Social media has done a great deal of work keeping us addicted and glued to our phones to the exclusion of people around us, trying to convince us that digital relationships are just as legitimate as real ones. And now AI is joining this fight, and we have no reason to think that it will do anything other than just compound the many harms that social media has inflicted on society. There's nothing at all wrong with online dating. Just don't get sucked into it taking up huge swaths of your time, because you'd be better trying to devote at least some of that time meeting somebody in real life. But when it comes to getting romantically involved with a chatbot, an arrangement that technology will inevitably evolve into full-on AI robot companions, I think there's a real danger to our humanity there, and it risks turning the empowerment that people in good relationships feel into something more akin to slavery. And in time, it will get pretty hard to figure out whether the human or the AI is the real slave. I'm the other Mac. Good luck out there.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Frank McCourt is the executive chairman of McCourt Global and founder of Project Liberty. In 2024, Frank released his first book, Our Biggest Fight: Reclaiming Liberty, Humanity, and Dignity in the Digital Age. At the Attention Governor Be Governed Forum in Montreal, Amber spoke with Frank about why he wants to buy TikTok, what he learned about the problems with social media when he owned the LA Dodgers, and how to build a better internet for the next generation.
All right, so we have about half an hour for a conversation on this topic of what the future of tech could be. Let's start there. Why is this a topic that interests you?
Well, for lots of reasons. I think I'd start with the fact that I'm a dad. I have 8 kids, and 4 from my first marriage, 4 from my current marriage. I know what it's like to raise children pre-internet, and I know what it's like to raise children in this internet age, this digital age. And I've had my own experiences over the years with technology I've watched how this entire beautiful internet, which was a decentralized telecommunications apparatus, essentially became highly centralized. And that concentration of power really concerned me. And lastly, I would just add, I come from a family of builders. We're 5 generations, started in Boston. My great-great-grandfather started building roads when Henry Ford started building cars. And we build large-scale public infrastructure, including internet systems and so forth. So have a fair amount, although I'm not a computer scientist or a technologist, we have a fair amount of knowledge as to how this technology actually works from the ground up.
And we're going to get into that. One of the things that we really want to focus on in this conversation are some of the solutions. How could things be different? What could be done? I wanted to talk to you about some of the work that you're doing at Project Liberty for people who maybe aren't as familiar with the organization.
Yeah, so I had a experience in LA when I owned the Dodgers, and in that era, I went through a public divorce, and I watched how social media had been weaponized, and I felt a little bit of that on the receiving end, and it really concerned me that here you are with this technology that had shifted in the 08-09 timeframe from this innocent kind of internet where we reconnected with people and shared photographs with people our friends and family and so forth, to something that was very, very performance-based. Facebook had introduced the like button, the smartphone was in everyone's hands, and suddenly it wasn't something that was necessarily factually correct or really newsworthy or insightful that was shared. What happened is what was getting likes and followers and clicks became kind of the holy grail of how the internet worked. So it became totally performance-based. And during my era in LA, going through that difficult time, the metaphor I use is I felt like I was watching my home burn down, and I was handed a small garden hose with low water pressure, while 1,000 people were just pouring gasoline on the flames. It was just a very helpless feeling, and one that I think a lot of people share. And this was going back now 15 years. So my first instinct after selling the Dodgers and moving on with life was to get policymakers, like many of you here, kind of working, understanding how this technology works at the core, and how this kind of surveillance machinery was extracting everything that makes us human and monetizing it, of course, but also now manipulating us. And really, let's really get the policymaking apparatus out ahead of this set of problems. So started a public policy school with Georgetown University in 2013, awesome school, but learned fairly quickly that policymaking alone can't keep up with the speed, the power, and just the brute force of big tech. So that's when we shifted and said, okay, yes, we need better policies. And I want to pause for a moment and just say how much I admire and respect the work that you all have done in the policy and governance space, because you've really done God's work here. And we've seen how difficult it is, though, to actually get these big platforms to operate differently, because we wouldn't be sitting here talking about all the harms and the concerns and that are only going to get amplified by AI if the policymaking alone could fix the problem. So in 2019, we shifted our focus to the actual infrastructure and said, okay, how would one create an alternative tech stack to the surveillance stack that actually is designed and built in harmony with democratic ideals and principles? And that begins with putting human beings at the center of the technology, not having the platforms be at the center.
And this goal or purpose that you have has become increasingly important, I think, especially over the past few years. And thinking back almost 10 years ago, I wrote a book in 2016 called Outsmarting Your Kids Online. Don't buy it, it's totally out of date. But I wrote that book at the time because I was trying to guide parents through this digital world and help them with social media. And then I started to realize as the years went on that the big tech companies just had so much power. It really shouldn't be the parents who were responsible and the ones who had to guide them through what is a total minefield. Can you talk a little bit about the past 10 years and maybe that shift that you mentioned as far as the goal, again, of the organization?
Yeah, so the aha moment for me really was when I brought together some brilliant technologists to say, like, how would you address this problem if you were given white space? Just unlimited resources and just you could, knowing now what we know about the internet and how ubiquitous it is, how necessary it is, right? We're all dependent on it. It's no longer a nice to have thing. We're all connected to the internet, and we need it to operate our daily lives, and for governments to operate, and individuals to operate, and businesses to operate. And we see when AWS has a shutdown, how things suddenly get paralyzed. And so we see how dependent we are. So, okay, we know we've built this incredible technology. How could it work differently? And the insight really was, this is technology that was really built from the ground up by simple core layer protocols. The first set of protocols connected devices. That was the internet. And then in '89 with Berners-Lee, another protocol connected our data, and that was the World Wide Web. And everything was moving along just fine until some people figured out that data was gold. The data was everything. And we saw the creation of these massive companies, this machinery it's really all about extracting personal data and accumulating it, aggregating it, and applying algorithms, and now AI, and which is just a more powerful algorithm. And so it is, they all discovered, and whether it was social, shopping, or search, It was our personal information that gave these platforms incredible insight about us. And when I say incredible insight, I'm not talking about they knew a few things about us. Each has 1 million data points on each of us. They know far more about us than we know about ourselves. And so why not another core layer protocol that actually connects us so that we're the ones who are owning and controlling our data, permissioning its use, benefiting from it, and so forth. I think what's really, for me, what was a critical shift in my thinking was that rather than just trying to control these huge companies that are uncontrollable, what if we kind of take Buckminster Fuller's, adage and put it in operation? And I'm going to paraphrase what he said, and that is, when a model is so fundamentally broken, don't spend your time and energy trying to fix it. Build the new model and make the old one obsolete. So really, that was kind of the insight to say, okay, let's start from the bottom of the stack, create a protocol or a suite of protocols that give people ownership and control of themselves again. And that's the technology that we built, and now there's 14 million people using it. So the question of can it scale, that's pretty clear it can. It's no challenge yet, though, to an internet that billions of people are using. So we need policymakers, governments to step in and say there's another version of the internet. We're not stuck with the one we have. And what I would ask people here to think about and maybe leave here with is a sense that, yes, we need better policies and so forth, but we don't need just to think about the internet as it is and how do we make it better. Let's think about an alternative that's designed from the ground up to be better and is in harmony with the exact policies and policy objectives that you'd like. In other words, it's fine to have GDPR and DMA and DSA and so on and so forth, but those are trying to bend technology to comply. Why not have technology that actually bakes those principles into the technology, starting, as I said, by putting human beings at the center? And so this was, for me, the big eye-opener. And that's when we really started focusing on rebuilding the stack from the ground up. I want to say one last thing. There are also people here in the room that are also builders and are putting solutions forward. I'm not suggesting that we have all the answers or that the tech we've built is the silver bullet. There are no silver bullets. But until we start to build the better version of this technology, we're not going to get to a better place. And so Project Liberty is focused not so much on the problem, because I think that is, the problem set is well defined now. I mean, I was listening this morning, it's pretty overwhelming and it can get pretty depressing. Let's shift and focus on solutions to the problem, because we now know what's wrong, and let's fix it before we make it more powerful.
Yeah, and maybe I can just do a shout out to Gander, a company here in Canada. I know they're in the room and they're trying to build a different type of social network for Canadians, and they've had a lot of momentum. So I agree on your point about builders. You talk about alternatives, and I became most familiar with your work when I was reading headlines around the bid for TikTok. I would love to talk a little bit about this. I know the plan for a TikTok, it could look different, it could be different, it could operate differently. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Project Liberty was never created to purchase TikTok. It was just an opportunity that presented itself that we took advantage of because it was we had built this alternative tech stack. We didn't need the Chinese technology or the algorithm. We could buy the US TikTok without the Chinese technology, bring the user base over and the data over, and then we'd have not 14 million people, but 184 million people in this alternative. And then you're getting to a scale where now you really do have an alternative that people then have the choice. Do I want to use a surveillance-based stack, which mines my data and extracts it and monetizes it without regard for me? And and actually uses that very information about me to manipulate me? Or do I want to use a version where I own and control my data, I'm permissioning its use. I get all the benefits of the internet, so I'm not giving anything up, but I reclaim my personhood, okay, my agency, my power, which is very fundamental to democracy, and by the way, benefit from the use of my data. So there's now technology available where you can actually compensate people for their data if it's used for a commercial use case. And this argument that we heard up until a few years ago that your data is not, your own data is not worth anything on an individual basis, and it's only worth something when it's aggregated, and only a few companies can do that. It's just not true. And 7 companies now worth $21 trillion, and that's with a T. Okay, it proves that our data is massively valuable. Why are we not getting value for it? Why, data is a human right and a property right. And we need to, I think about it in that way and just reclaim what's ours. And this is the moment to do it. With TikTok, we saw an opportunity, raise $20 billion, which, by the way, proves that there are people interested in an alternative to what we have. And that was no problem raising that money. And we put forward the bid. And now it's unclear what's going to happen. And we'll see, because it's still a fluid situation. But it appears that there may be a transaction in play that may not comply with the very legislation that was put forward to solve for a very real national security issue. And by the way, the national security issue is not that China has information on 170 million Americans. It's that China can manipulate what 170 million Americans think, and that's really a big threat. And so this is really, really powerful technology that knows everything about us and can manipulate us. And I just believe at the core of all this, we need to reclaim what's ours. One last point on this. It's really hard to change 30 years of entrenched technology. And maybe you catch lightning in a bottle and buy TikTok and move 170 million users over, and suddenly you have scale. But I'll tell you where something really, really interesting is happening right now. And this is, for me, the glimmer and the hopeful thing. When technology changes, that's when space opens and new designs can take hold. So we've had a certain version of the internet for the last 30 years, highly entrenched. It's now, sadly, an app-centric, highly centralized internet. We're moving to the so-called agentic web. And this is a big shift in the technology. This is our moment, because it's much easier to actually change the design of how technology works when that technological shift happens, and than it is to affect the entrenched and impact the entrenched technology. It's a short window. It's not one that we can be talking about in 5 years or 3 years. And by the way, the big tech platforms are moving so quickly because they know it's a vulnerability for them. They know the shift in the technology opens up the doors for new ideas and better design and better technology. So they are flooding the zone with unprecedented amount of capital to make it to make this fork in the road that we have kind of an inevitable. We inevitably follow them, and what they're building is a more powerful version of the technology that has created all the harms that you all have been identifying and trying to regulate for. Why not build the alternative? And to do that, I mean, because this shift is real. This is happening. It doesn't have to go in the direction that big tech wants and big AI wants. As a matter of fact, I would say that is exactly the wrong direction, because don't think of AI and social differently. What is our social graph information and our personal information that's been exploited with so-called Web 2.0 or Web 2, the current surveillance stack. It's the version of that in AI will be our AI context, okay? The context that we share through a chatbot with an LLM. LLMs know nothing about us. They're generic models, large language models. Where the information comes into play is through conversations with chatbots, like GPT with OpenAI, Grok with X, etc. That context is our personal information. And I would argue strenuously that that information should be ours, not the company's. Just like our social graph information should have been ours, but we let those horses out of the barn. We now have a chance to make sure that our AI context is ours. We can decide what we share with what LLM. We should be able to move our context from one LLM to the other. It's just called portability. So think of your data or your AI context as your phone number, right? It was one day years ago it was owned by a telco. Now it's owned by you. Think of these platforms as telcos. Our information should be interoperable. We should be able to talk on. You can have one phone carrier, I have another one. We can communicate. It's just technology. It used to work one way. It works a different way now. We need portability. We need to own our context. We need interoperability. These are fundamental things, but it begins and ends with whose data is it? Where is it stored? Who gets to use it for what purpose? And who benefits from it financially? And if our data is ours, we can have all the benefits of this beautiful internet technology and the advances that AI will surely bring. But we have agency and power returned to us. We have technology that's in harmony with democratic principles and ideals. And then we can enjoy the benefits of AI and together go solve the other problems that we need to solve globally and locally and solve them at scale. But I fear we're not going to solve any of them. We're only going to create more problems if we go down the track that big tech wants to take us.
Yeah, so maybe I can ask you just a quick follow-up in terms of where big tech wants to take us, because when you think about building a better version of digital, I want to believe this. I want to believe that that is possible. I think it is possible. I think there's public support of building something like that. You mentioned you raised $20 billion, so clearly there are people who want to see this better version of digital. But what about the momentum that we have right now? I mean, you're talking to people in the technology sector. We so often hear about just the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, the Elon Musks of the world. What do you see about being able to build that? Are there enough people who believe in that?
Yeah, absolutely yes. I mean, it's the one thing I can say with a great deal of confidence is that the alternative technology can be built. As a matter of fact, it is built and is being built. And again, I want to emphasize, it's not a silver bullet. We're not saying that our version is the only version, but we've demonstrated that there's an alternative available. I'll give you a quick example, going back to telco for a moment, because this whole thing is a bit deja vu for an infrastructure person and people that have built different generations of technology. In 1993, we started a telco company in the US called RCN. And we took on the 7 oligarchs of the time, which were the baby bells that were the result of the breakup of AT&T. And what we saw coming was a shift in technology. Just like app-centric web to agentic web, it was copper wire to fiber optics, a shift in the fundamental technology, which created opportunity. And so we raised $8 billion at the time, and we built a new telco in the United States. And why? We saw this shift, and we weren't constrained or as the baby bells were by being built on massive copper wire infrastructure. They were not, design ready for high-speed internet. We started with squeaky clean infrastructure, put the fiber optics in, and then we're the first in the world to give people a bundle of high-speed internet, cable TV, and phone. And it was kind of obvious, right? Because internet needs needs fiber optics to be able to for a high-speed broadband. And we knew over time everybody would want this internet in their homes. And so off we went. So we built it first, proved that an alternative to what the 7 Baby Bells had, there was an alternative. What really helped us, though, in many other telcos and massive investment in telecommunications, eventually worldwide, was the 1996 Telecommunications Act in the United States. Why? It made phone numbers portability and mandated telco interoperability. So suddenly, all the friction, we had actually people showing up saying, where do I sign up to RCN? And then they'd say, and here's my phone number. And we'd say, you can't have your phone number. And they'd say, well, I come back when I can because I want to keep my phone number. Why on earth would people feel so possessive of their phone number that that we needed new policies and regulation to make phone numbers portable, but yet people haven't connected the fact that their social graph information and eventually their AI context will be 1,000,000 times more valuable than their phone number. It really is not that complicated. We need to reclaim what's ours and build a stack that is actually in harmony with what we want to see happen, what we want to optimize for, rather than just kind of in this constant sparring match, which we'll lose against these big tech behemoths.
So we have just about 10 minutes left. I wanted to focus on what people in this room can do when we talk about building a better version of digital. When you think about government officials, policymakers, philanthropic organizations, what can people do to support this better version of digital that you're speaking about?
Well, I think first of all, you're doing it by meeting up and having these conversations. And my goal here is simple, and it's just is to ask you to just just imagine a different paradigm, in that it's just technology. It works a certain way because it's been designed to work a certain way, and there are incentives. It can work in a totally different way. Good policy making and regulations can help that. And I want to point out that there are 2 types of regulations, right? You know better than I. One set actually constrains or tries to constrain bad behavior. The other set of regulation, like the Telecom Act I referred to, actually creates new opportunities and new standards. So I think that the way we've thought about this with Project Liberty, and the way I would answer your question, is that it's not one thing. We've designed Project Liberty with 3 separate tracks. The tech we've talked about a lot. We definitely need another version of the technology, but we have a policy track, right, which is what many of you have been deeply involved in for longer than we have. And as I said earlier, I really have deep admiration and respect for that. And we're going to need better policies and so forth that enable this new world. And then the third track, and I'm not sure what to call it, but it's kind of the alliance or coalition building or movement type of track, where we just need people to understand what's at stake and demand it. And that will help facilitate and compress time and make sure there are better policies and make sure there's better technology and so forth. And I think we're beginning to see this happen now. And so it's just like, spread the word, keep doing what you're doing. Let's figure out how to coalesce and align, because I am concerned. I said earlier that there's a real glimmer here of the tech changing, and we can fix this right now by implementing better design before it's a foregone conclusion, which is what big tech and big AI want us to. They just want that foregone conclusion. So now's the moment. And what I'm concerned about is that our efforts are, we fail because we're atomized and balkanized. That we meet up here, we meet up in Munich, We meet up in Brussels, we meet up in New York, we meet up in and the conversations are rich, and the desire to change this is here. But how do we connect dots here in a way there's a coalescing of this activity in a way that gives courage to our political leaders, right? And if political leaders won't do it and don't have the courage, then people should go ahead and impose their will. And this is, I think, an issue that's existential if your concern is democracy. I think it's which in turn is based on trust and truth, which we've lost. And I don't think you actually have democracy. I'm sure you don't have it without that. And I think it's so sad to me as a member of a family, and of immigrants. My family came from Ireland, and they came for a better life. And in our case, we've actually been builders of infrastructure. So roll up your sleeve, get your hands dirty, and build it. And we started in Boston, and then America, and now around the world. And I'm so proud of what my family, not me, my family has built over 135 years. And to see it dismantled, and in the way it's being dismantled, is something that, like all of you, I just can't sit idly by and just let it happen. But but I want to really leave you with an optimistic sense of possibility here. And because let's not completely recycle on all the problems and all the harms, and the world is on fire, and democracy is failing, and kids are being preyed upon, and trust and truth are gone, and the information ecosystem is completely contaminated, and there's all kinds of scams happening, and everything just seems dark and negative. It is, but sometimes it has to get really bad for people to actually rise up and say, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. Okay? It needs to be different. We can do this. Okay? The building the alternative tech is the easy part, relatively speaking. It's how do we mobilize to make this happen? How do we get Canada to show up and be part of the solution? Because I think Canada is a huge part of this. I think all of the kind of middle powers, whether it's Canada or Australia or UK or EU as a whole or Japan, etc., these are the same conversations. I've been to these places, same conversations. And you all can really pull together and align and make a big difference. If you, on the other hand, approach this from a place of fear, there's no leverage in fear. Approach it from a position of strength. We're at risk of being put into a corner here, and what big tech wants this to be is a debate between pro-tech, anti-tech. And anybody that doesn't agree with what the big platforms want is anti-tech. We need to change that. And first of all, we need not to allow ourselves to get into that false choice. We need to create a choice for people. What are we for? We're for pro-human-centric technology. We're for pro-democracy technology. We're for a better version of technology. We're not anti-technology. We're anti-centralized technology, surveillance-based technology, destructive and harmful technology, and platform-centric. And as many of you have talked about, watching the conflation of technological power and that concentration of that power and political power, and watching them come together. If there's nothing that could be more dangerous to democracy than that and this. And so this is our moment to really fix this. It's too bad that it's gotten to this place, but maybe that's what we needed to get the push. This is the issue. If we can return to people what is theirs, return power and agency to people so that they feel like, okay, they're not helpless. Okay, we have a role to play here. There is hope. There is a way forward, and that's empowering. And by the way, your data is very valuable, so people can be enriched. This could be the single biggest redistribution of wealth without a tax that's ever occurred. And because the data is massively valuable. But let's get it working for people, and so that we're all together again on this and we're solving problems together.
Absolutely. We just have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to ask a terrible question with only 2 minutes left. And I do want to end on an optimistic point, but I think when you talk about connecting the dots, the one thing that I think comes to mind for me is the Trump administration and the very real reality of potential retaliation for individuals who do push back on tech. Just, in 2 minutes, some final words on that very big question.
Well, as I said earlier, I think you can't approach things from a place of fear, and this approach it from a place of strength. What could be more a better place to approach all of this from than what's good for human beings, what's good for people? And how does big tech or any politician defend, win that debate? Okay, this is, I can't really overemphasize this because it sounds so simplistic, but the dirty secret here is that big tech doesn't want us to understand that our data is us. It's everything about us. Everything, to such a degree that we get, under the current version of the surveillance technology, we get profiled and manipulated. And by the way, we're losing our free will, which is what makes us human beings and different from other animal species. We're losing it. Let's reclaim what's ours. Our data is our personhood. It's our being. It's our digital DNA. It's probably more valuable than our biological DNA because it's our whole lived experience. It's what we feel, what we think, how we emote. It's in the thought that a young person could go on a chatbot, share their vulnerabilities directly with a chatbot, and then be manipulated by that it's just morally wrong. We need technology that's in harmony with our democratic ideals and principles and basic human rights. And remember, it's also a property right. Your data is very valuable.
Absolutely. Well, listen, thank you so much for leaving us with this optimistic note for the rest of the event. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Amber.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank and Amber. Coming up next, we tell you where you can see The Amber Mac Show for our very first recording in front of a live audience.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
We are coming up on almost a year of doing the show together, and I'm so excited to share that we are taking the Amber Mac Show podcast to the Halifax area.
Yeah, as somebody who's lived in Halifax now for 20 years, I've watched the tech scene grow here, and it's a really vibrant, great, exciting group of people that we're going to be there with. So please come out and join us if you're in the area. We'll be at the 2025 Atlantic Technology Summit, and we'll be talking about the AI trends of 2025, explaining about how AI works, and looking forward to what to expect in 2026.
Tickets are going fast, so make sure you purchase yours online, and we will see you there. And thank you so much for listening to the Amber Mac Show. As always, you can find us everywhere online, and we'll see you next week.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.